Wow. So Nintendo just announced a Zelda movie, and not just any movie, but a live action movie, like with real people. No more of this Illumination stuff for well, probably for Mario still, but not for Zelda, which I kind of find it somehow harder to believe. But obviously, you guys heard me shout about this and nearly have a heart attack in our update that I posted just a little bit ago. I had to pull a larger crew together so that we could talk about this movie, what we think it's going to be like, who's attached to it, who we want to attach to it, and everything in between. So I'm joined today by my good friend and partner here in crime, Ash Paulson, and we've pulled in the big guns here. We've got Rebecca Stone from Twinfinite to help us break down today's news. How you doing, Rebecca?
I'm so psyched. You know, I live, breathe, sleep The Legend of Zelda. So this is big news. This is a big day. Thanks for having me today. Yeah,
we're thrilled to have you. I want to start off with you because obviously Ash and I are on this channel all the time. You're our special guest. So obviously you're psyched. You're excited. Did this come as a surprise to you that it's live action versus animation?
I mean, I feel like we've had these rumors for forever, and, you know, you take rumors at face value, always take it with a grain of salt. I feel like it is a little bit surprising just because we had the Mario animated film with Illumination, and I thought, okay, well, Nintendo has a film collaboration with Illumination. They're probably going to keep working with them for other franchises. So it is a little bit surprising that they are going live action for this one, but I think it makes sense. Zelda's different than Mario.
Yeah, I think it does make sense for it to be live action. I'm just as surprised as you are, but I'm really curious, Ash. You are literally in Tinseltown as we speak. You're our resident Angelino. What do you make of the folks attached to this film so far?
I mean, we were looking at Avi Arad's credits to either producing and executive producing credits before we started this discussion, and as we noted, there's some really good here. There's also some really bad here. I mean, it runs the gamut. We've got Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, hooray! Then we've got Venom, Let There Be Carnage. Then we got Ghost in the Shell, hooray! And then we've got Morbius. So there's a lot of extremes both ways here. Of course, this could really, I don't think Nintendo is going to, really go all in with someone unless they're really, really confident that they're going to do right by one of their most darling IPs, right? They're gonna, Nintendo obviously are known to be incredibly protective of their IPs. They're the Disney of the game industry. So, we have to trust their judgment here, I think, of course. But yeah, this could go either way based solely on the producer credits here. But,
yes.
I think Nintendo's going to be very guarded with this. And if they think he's the guy, then, maybe we have to trust he's the guy.
Yeah, I wonder about that. Obviously, there's, he's the, I believe, the producer on this film?
I believe so, yes. Yeah.
So what do we make, are any of us here, I guess this is a good question, are any of us familiar with Wes Bale, the director that they've attached to this?
No.
I can't say I am.
I'm looking him up right now, and it looks like
is it
maybe
Wes,
the most
Wes
notable
Ball or
thing.
Wes
Is it Ball? I don't
Wes Ball.
Wes Ball.
Yeah.
Yes,
he does
Wes
the
Ball.
Maze
I
Runner.
apologize.
Have you seen the Maze Runner series?
I have not. What do you make of it?
They're based on a book, so it is an adaptation. It's like a little bit more sci-fi fantasy, a little like apocalyptic themes. So I feel like something like that could, that he has experience with that.
He's also doing the upcoming Planet of the Apes sequel, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes.
A lot of really good special effects
next year, apparently.
in those movies.
Yeah, right.
I'm very interested to see how that turns out. In terms of, it doesn't necessarily lend itself, like in my mind, of course, to Zelda, but obviously Zelda is going to be adapted in some way, especially when you consider live action. You can't just take what works in the games wholesale and lift it into real people doing it in films. Rebecca, what do you think, if anything, they're going to change about Zelda as we know it to kind of adapt it to film? I can think of one big thing, but I don't want to blurt it right out off the top of my head.
I know what you're going to say, and I think that's a whole discussion to have. I'm mostly curious if they are going to have it be based on an existing Zelda game, like if it's loosely based on Ocarina of Time or Breath of the Wild, or if they're going to come up with their own original storyline for it. Because unlike, Mario has the plot of, you save the princess, although they did twist it up a little bit in that one. So I'm wondering if, it's just going to be something brand new. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. What about you, Ash? What do you think Nintendo may, or rather these the filmmakers behind this may or may not change to kind of make it I don't want to say believable, but make it to make it possible for the viewer to suspend their disbelief while watching real people enact, the fight against Ganon potentially.
God, I mean, that's what's so hard, right? Because we don't even know where the jumping off point is here. We don't know if they're going to be adapting an existing game in the series. We don't know if we're looking at like a teen Link, like adult Link, or a child Link. Are we looking at two different Links? Is this going to be an adaptation of Ocarina of Time? It really, there's so much that we don't even know that it's hard to answer that question. Like if they're going for a more grounded medieval set story that's maybe a little bit more Lord of the Rings in nature, then that's its own completely different thing than if we're talking about an adaptation of Ocarina of Time, which involves time travel and fantastical things like the Sacred Realm and things like that, right? So it's hard to even begin to know, because we kind of need to know that jumping off point before we know how they're going to worry about relating that to audiences, right?
I was going to agree with that and say, is this going to be something where it is a little bit more of their violent IPs? If there's going to be sword fighting and enemies, is there going to be blood? Is there going to be, is this going to be something that's rated PG-13? Oh no, for Nintendo. Are they trying to make it more mature, or is it going to be a family-friendly film? Those are really good questions.
Those are excellent questions. I have to point out, I'm going to bring it back real quick to what I kind of alluded to earlier. Link has to talk, right? Like, Link has to talk. You can't make a movie with a mute protagonist. Like, that doesn't... It barely works in video games. So I don't know how it's going... Could you imagine, just this stoic, stone-faced actor just standing there and everyone's explaining to him what he's thinking?
It's going to be weird. I mean, I almost kind of wish... I don't know what I wish. I always kind of thought that if we ever did get a Zelda theatrical movie, that it probably would be CG, or at least partially CG. So I'm still kind of trying to wrap my head around the fact that we do now have a confirmed live action Zelda movie, and it's weird because I'm sitting here now as we talk about it and I'm racking my brain, like, who would I actually be okay with seeing play Link and speak as Link on screen, right? Because even just thinking about the idea of Link speaking, let alone being represented by a live actor, is just kind of making my brain turn to mush right now.
I am a big defender of Link not speaking in the games. I know people will argue it's time for him to speak. He actually does, speak in the games. We just don't see it. But I'm a big, defender of that. And I wish that they will find a way for them to make it, to make that work in the movie and just make it very cinematic, like it feels natural, it's not feeling awkward. That would be the best case scenario for me. But I think realistically that's gonna be a change that fans are just gonna have to get used to and be okay with, because I think people who don't know the series from the video games who go to see this movie would be super confused if he's not speaking.
That begs a very interesting question, one that has been rolling around in my mind for the last half hour since they announced this. We've seen evidence that Nintendo is taking these movies pretty seriously insofar as the box art for the upcoming Princess Peach game was modified to make her look more like movie Peach. Do we think that this movie will have an eventual knock-on effect on the development of whatever the next mainline Zelda is, or a future mainline Zelda title?
God, it sounds too... it sounds too hand-wavy to say, God, I hope not, because we don't even know what this looks like yet. But I don't know. When I think of Zelda games, I don't want like a realism-inspired Zelda game.
Same.
I mean, we got that kind of with Twilight Princess, and that hasn't aged well visually. And I don't know. When I think of like a dark fantasy Zelda that's going for pure realism, that isn't really what I think I want when it comes to potential future Zelda games and their art style. But at the same time, that's going a little bit that's towing the line into something that I don't like doing, which is like, oh, this is ruining my childhood, and dismissing it out of hand before we even see what this could look like. So I don't want to go that far with it yet, but just on the face of it, it sounds like, I don't know if I like that, you know?
I understand your sentiment to a degree. I understand not wanting, like, you know, too much realism inserted into Zelda, because part of what makes Zelda so wonderful, at least to me, is that they take risks with it in a way that they don't with other IPs. You know, we're all, you know, in the Nintendo sphere praising Mario Wonder for doing something Zelda's been doing since the 90s, right? Which is to reinvent itself with each new game. And so I don't want it to necessarily lock Zelda into a specific style, but I do think that I think it would be really jarring in the same way that it's jarring to go from movie Mario to, at least up until recently, video game Mario. If you picked up these games and you were like, why doesn't Homeboy talk? Like, why does he never talk? And I agree with Rebecca. I think that obviously there is speech implied on Link's part in most of the games. Breath of the Wild does a great job of explaining why Link doesn't talk, which I think is really cool. But in most games, yeah, it's implied Link has said stuff. They just don't bore you with him recapping what you, the player, have experienced. But that being said, yeah, I don't know that I'm ready to wave away, you know, potential changes that a Zelda movie could make to the franchise. I think that Zelda, in some ways, is again ripe for reinvention. I think in a post Tears of the Kingdom world, we all realize Zelda needs to do something big and new to reinvigorate itself, because if we got Breath of the Wild 3, I think we'd all be like, okay, but you already said you did everything. But I'm curious to hear from you, Rebecca. What influence, if any, do you think that this film could have on the games?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think necessarily the visual style would influence it the way that we're seeing for Mario, just because it is live action, and I think that's a little bit harder to have that influence from, you know, from live action to graphics for a video game. But I think if there is going to be any kind of influence from it, especially if they do an original story for the movie, they might end up taking that concept and putting, you know, aspects of that into the next game. Like maybe the next game has a very similar plot to what the film is, or maybe there's a new villain besides Ganondorf. I assume Ganondorf is going to be the main villain of this film, but, you know, maybe he has.
I hope so.
I think so.
Maybe he has, you know, a little sidekick or someone that we end up seeing later in the games, or maybe new enemy types, or maybe, you know, Zelda has an actual family. You see more of like the royal family in the film, and that gets portrayed into the next game. I think it'll have maybe those kind of influences, if anything, rather than like graphic influences.
Yeah, you know, I mostly agree with that. I think that Zelda is I think there's a lot of room to expand the Zelda universe. A lot of ways in which you can flesh out the narratives from all these games, right? There's a lot of stuff that Zelda games don't touch on. You know, Hyrule exists, but what about other nations on that planet that they live on? Could there potentially be others? I'm sure there are. I think that there's a way in which you can make a live action movie complementary to the lore in the games and the way they exist without rewriting one or the other to suit the existing narrative. But I want to do a little thought exercise with everyone here on the panel. What Zelda story of the existing stories would you like to hear most told, and who would be your dream cast for that story?
It's so hard.
I like the first part of that, not the last part. I like the first part of it. Oh, God.
Can we start
Ash,
with that?
You sound like you're sweating,
with that
so
part and then come back to the casting one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
Those are both
Let's start with which narrative you'd like to see.
It's hard. I mean, obviously, y'all know I love the Wind Waker. I'm a big Wind Waker fan, but I don't think that's a good entry point into a Zelda movie story, obviously. So I'm gonna punt on the Wind Waker. Honestly, I gotta go with a game that's celebrating its 25th anniversary very soon that I think is a really great coming of age story in general. And I'm sorry if I took anyone's answer, but that's Ocarina of Time. It is a good standard Zelda story about good versus evil, but on top of that, when you add the time travel element into it, it becomes a really touching story about the loss of childhood innocence, right? And about losing one's childhood in a literal sense, losing 7 years of your life and what that means. And I think that the right actor could really could capture the kind of mental anguish that Link might go through. That we see that captured in the game, but I think the right actor could really capture what that sudden loss of childhood innocence must be like for the hero. And if you get the right actor in that role, I think you can have, you have your great story of good versus evil with Link and Zelda versus Ganondorf and the three pieces of the Triforce and all that essential lore. But then you have that emotional touchstone with what Link goes through, losing his childhood, having to sleep for 7 years to be able to wield the Master Sword. So I think that there's a kernel of a really good emotional touchstone there that would work for a good adaptation, I think, as kind of the jumping off point here, if we're talking specifically about adapting a game.
All right. I like that. Well, how about you, Rebecca?
Yeah, I have to agree. And no, you didn't steal my answer, just because I think it really makes sense.
Okay, good.
I think, it is really one of the solid foundational stories of The Legend of Zelda that really every game after that builds upon. I mean, you can say that Majora's Mask is obviously a sequel, but you can also say that Twilight Princess is a sequel, Wind Waker is a sequel. There's so much that you can do after you already have that foundation. So I think that is a really good starting point for them to, make this movie. It's it has that simple foundational base for the movie, but you're right, there's so many different aspects, that they can explore within that. I would most be interested if they did base it off of Ocarina of Time, for them to include some of the stuff that's not directly in the game, but is implied, like the Hyrulean War that takes place before the game, what happens to Link's parents, what really sets them on that path. And then I think there's a lot of potential there for them to, do a younger version of actors for Link and Zelda, and then have that time skip and just have that really be like a, that's a moment in the game where you see the boy and the girl flash forward to 7 years in the future, and all of a sudden it's, the famous actors that we know. So I think that would be a great opportunity for them to do for the film.
Nice. Mine personally would be a two-parter, and I would want it to be Breath of the Wild, but I'd want the first film to be everything that you see through Link's memories.
Ooh.
So I want to see Link train to become Zelda's, champion. Each of the champions go through their storylines, and to have it end on Ganon obliterating all the champions, destroying Hyrule Castle, wiping out the army, and the final moments of that first film being Zelda placing Link into the Shrine of Resurrection and fighting to hold Ganon within the castle walls. And to have that just be like, boom, movie's over. Like, come back when we filmed Breath of the Wild, the movie, and just, to set the stage for a adaptation of the actual game. I think that would be really cool. Plus, I kind of just want to see a movie where we get Zelda featured as a heroine, where she gets kind of a boss babe moment. She gets to be the one who's technically saves the day.
I do think whatever direction they go in, they're definitely going to give Zelda, a bigger role, a more active role, and that's something where they could really lean into with, if they do more of an Ocarina of Time based story, having Sheik have a lot of screen time, more than what you see in the actual game.
Right. Well, and just given what they did with Peach in the Super Mario Brothers movie,
exactly.
I mean, just based on that, they're probably going to give Zelda a much more active role in this too, and I would only hope so.
Definitely.
All right, so we've broken down what stories we want to see, but Rebecca, I'm finally going to put you back on the spot. It is time to tell me who you want in your dream Zelda movie cast. Who have you got on deck?
Oh my gosh, I don't know if I have like a dream, like one for each Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf, but I have so many options that I would like to see for Zelda, one for Ganondorf, and I have no idea for Link. So can I give you that at least? So I was thinking for Zelda, a lot of actresses who maybe have already had roles as other princesses in like other series. I know Disney has a lot of the live action films now for series. I don't know if Emma Watson at this point would be too old to be Princess Zelda, but I liked her as Belle in Beauty of the Beast. And I think her name was Lily James, did Cinderella, which might be like a little bit, I think, more of a softer type of princess role. So I don't know. I think that she could do a good job as Zelda. I don't ever know if I say her name right, but Saoirse Ronan, is that how you say her name?
So it's so funny. That's who I had on my list, and I think it's Swarse.
Is it Saoirse? I don't know how to say her name.
I
don't know.
Swarse.
I have no
sure.
idea.
Yeah.
But she came to mind as well, because I know she has, a lot of really good roles in movies that she's been in. This one is kind of more of a, I guess, I haven't heard this name thrown around for Zelda, but Sadie Sink, who I know from Stranger Things and a couple other roles. She has red hair, but I think that she could make a good Zelda anyway. But if not a Zelda, maybe she would make a good Malin if we did like an Ocarina of Time type thing. So those are just a few of my ideas for Zelda. And then who I want to see as Ganondorf the most is Jason Momoa. I think he would be an excellent Daddy Ganondorf type character.
Interesting. All right, how about you, Ash?
This is a mess because I didn't think you were going to say Swarse Ronan. She was kind of like my ace in the hole. Like, okay, maybe no one's going to say her, but yeah, because I've seen her. I've seen her. I still will, because I also had Emma Watson, but of course that's like the obvious answer, and I don't know. I feel like that's a little too obvious, and like, I've seen Swarse Ronan in some of the other movies she's in, and she looks kind of already like Princess Zelda, right? Like she kind of already has look to her. So, it's funny. We were throwing around Steve. We were talking about Anya Taylor-Joy earlier, and it's funny that she's already Peach's voice because I can actually see her as a live action Zelda. I think she's got that, like, the face for it, and so I feel like that could work. But I don't know that it is different directors, a different production, of course. But I don't know that Nintendo would want to double dip necessarily. But I could actually see her as a live-action Zelda, so that's what's funny. But yeah, I also had Swarse Ronan. As far as Link, I'm going to come back to that because I really don't know. And I'm glad you also didn't know, hard. Rebecca, because I'm like, it's so hard.
I also feel like I'm thinking of like the actors that I'm thinking of are way too old to be playing like
exactly
these young of characters. Like Link is supposed to be like 16 or 17. Yeah. So is Zelda. The only other like young actresses that I can think for Zelda would be like Renee Rapp or like Sabrina Carpenter, even maybe. Like I don't know. I feel like I'm so not in touch with like who the young and up and coming actresses are.
I do too. But you're saying though that your dream actor for Link is not Tom Holland. Are we safe in saying that Tom Holland is not your dream Link?
I think it's a little overrated.
Yeah. No, great actor, but I don't know if I see him as Link.
I would rather see Zendaya as Zelda than Tom Holland as Link.
So what's funny, you were talking about how some of the people you're thinking of are all like too old, and so initially for a second there was another Tom that I briefly thought about for Link because he's kind of soft-spoken in the role that I'm thinking of him in already, and that's Tom Sturridge, who plays Dream in Sandman, which is a great show, and he plays a very soft-spoken, almost elf-like presence in that show. But when I look at pictures of him, and I'm good, but he's 37. He looks young, I think, because of the makeup he wears in the show. He looks super young and almost elf-like. But when you look at pictures of him on like Google, he looks way too old for Link. So I don't think Tom Sturridge is going to work. So I don't know about Link. Ganondorf, I know a lot of people throw around Idris Elba, amazing actor. I think he could kill it. But that's actually not where I'm going with this. Bear with me. Dave Bautista. Now, I know he's Drax, but he has shown recently that he does have some dramatic acting chops with movies like Cabin in the Woods. He's got that giant, overwhelming, beefy presence that Ganondorf does. I could maybe see it. I'm just saying, maybe Dave Bautista.
Eyes. I can see it in his eyes.
Right?
I really can, yes.
Right? I'm just saying.
His eyebrows.
There's a possibility.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But with Link, I don't know. I don't know about Link. I really don't.
All right. So my picks are a little out there. I'm taking some artistic license with the characters for these. I'm going to start, though, with my pick for Ganon. Ganondorf. I would like to see Kumail Nanjiani as Ganondorf. Because when he had to bulk up for the Eternals, homeboy was jacked. Now he's just doing Tide commercials. But he got huge. And I personally think he could cut a pretty imposing figure if he had to take on the role and had to get big for it. He's not so old that he's unbelievably because my issue with Batista is he's already said he's getting too old to bulk up for roles. That's why he wore a shirt in Guardians 3, and he's like, I'm kind of too old to be doing the big action bits. And I'm like, Ganon, a real life Ganon needs to be comfortable shirtless. Homeboy needs to be willing to show off his bod a little.
A real life Ganondorf.
I think Kumail would do a good hot daddy Ganon. I think he'd be good at that.
Okay.
I struggled more with the other two, and that's because, like you said, Rebecca, Link and Zelda are pretty young. Ganon can be older because, he's the bad guy. Young people fighting against an old guy is fine. But my pick, based on how she carries herself and how she behaves, not so much her appearance, for Zelda would be Sophie Turner from Game of Thrones.
Oh.
She has a very regal air to
one.
her. She did great in Game of Thrones, carrying herself as a member of royalty, right? I mean, a dye job to blonde, that's pretty easy, right? And I think she has a good look for Zelda, especially if you're talking about a badass, capable Zelda, a Zelda that could fight back, that isn't just getting kidnapped. Sophie Turner, I think, is a great fit for it. Just look at her work in Game of Thrones. She is... I think she can pull off Zelda real easy. Now, like the two of you, I struggled with who to choose for Link because I think that Link embodies a few qualities. He's young, he's kind of sprightly, and frankly, he's a little wayfish, right? He's not a big burly guy. He does these amazing feats of strength, but he's strong in the way Cloud Strife is. It doesn't make sense, right? Stick arms wielding incredible power.
He's a little scrawny.
Yeah, he's a scrawny guy. He's not meant to be buff.
Yeah. And he's even made fun of for that in Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild. People point out how scrawny
so
he is.
my pick is Timothy Chalamet.
Okay.
He's kind of got as close to the Link face as you could probably get on a real human. And again, it's just a difference in hair color. I think he could pull it off. I think again, people would comment oh, you're gonna save the world. You're built like a twig, my man. I don't know that you've got the bod to go up against hot Ganon, but
yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. I can't argue with that.
Right.
I want to throw out another Zelda one because I'm looking up some younger actresses who I think could be good. I don't think this is a super common household name, but Mackenzie Foy. She's only 22, and she was the daughter Murphy in Interstellar. So that was a couple years ago. She's a little bit older now, but she kind of has a regal face to her, I think. And she's a really good actress.
I had seen Interstellar, but I didn't clock
stuff.
her name when you said it. Yeah, that's a really good pick.
Yeah, I don't think she's really a household name. And I almost hope in a way that at least Link is maybe somebody who is a new name, who isn't somebody that's immediately recognizable to us. Just because I think maybe in some cases it would be more believable to us because it's not somebody that we have other associations with.
It's going to be interesting to see if Nintendo differs in their strategy between these two films. Because obviously, with the Mario movie, they went for big name recognizability, right? They wanted actors and actresses who you could pick off the back of the box and say, oh, I know them. They're good, right? And that is a fear of mine because, I don't want to see Chris Pratt as Link. I don't want to see, Jack Black as Ganondorf. As great as they did in the Mario movie, I can't think of a big name actor or actress that would suit these roles really well, outside of it, as it's a live action.
One just came to my mind for Zelda, and I'm not saying she's like, oh, this is it. That's just one potential idea, but again, she might be too mainstream. But that's Dakota Fanning, and she kind of has that sprightly look that Zelda has, you know. And I'm thinking specifically of the way she looked. She had kind of like this really intense look in the Twilight movies. That kind of, when I think of Zelda, I think of a very intense character, and so I don't know. Dakota Fanning maybe could work. It's just kind of I'm really grasping here because it's so.
She
again,
also has a younger
to,
sister, Elle Fanning. So if
true.
she's aged out of the Zelda role, her sister looks just
true.
like her.
That's true, and she's a little younger.
Would make a really good one. I'm
Yeah.
image searching these names as they come up because who would have thought we'd be?
Me too.
Yeah, I know
doing
some of them I
celebrity
have
gossip
too.
here on GVG, but so. I want to before we close things out because there's so much here and there's so little information on the ground, but I want to get a prediction from each of us on what we think is going, just one prediction in the Zelda movie, so that we can come back to this years from now and find out if we were right. I'm going to start with you, Ash.
Ooh.
I'm going to put you on the spot because you have Link in your background, and it's the biggest element of your
Why?
backdrop.
Oh God. Well, I mean, I want to say a safe one. Like there will be Zelda music.
No, come on, take a
references
risk
in the movie, but that's too easy. I know. Okay, you know what? Ganondorf will be the main villain, of course, obviously, but I think they're gonna pull. From like a secondary villain in the games too. And you know what? I'm gonna put it out there. We're gonna see Aghanim. He's gonna be like the court wizard or something who's helping Ganondorf achieve his ends. Doesn't have to be in a Link to the Past, adaptation. I'm just saying they're going to use the character of Aghanim, who's going to somehow be helping Ganondorf in some way. He's not going to be Ganondorf like he is in A Link to the Past. He's Ganon, but he's going to be helping him. Aghanim is going to be a supporting villain.
I could get behind that. I like that. How about you, Rebecca?
I love that. Okay, here's my crazy off the wall prediction is that there's going to be part of the movie, maybe less than 30 seconds long, where Link is maybe feeding chickens on his ranch or something, and the chickens start attacking him, and he has to
That's
hop
solid.
over the fence to get away from
They
them or
have to
something.
include that.
The chickens are going to attack him.
I love it. Good
Mine
one. Good one.
is that we will not see Child Link fight. If Child Link is depicted in the movie at all, he will not fight. He won't take down a big bad. He won't take down anything. He won't wield a sword because I think that it'll turn casual audiences off. I think like the same way Anakin being super great at everything in episode 1 really turned people off. I think that seeing Child Link take down like a huge monster will not occur in the movie. I think we'll see him, but it'll be like flashbacks of his life before training to become the hero.
That's what I was going to ask, if it was like maybe like a lead up to what the story
I
is.
absolutely think we see bits and pieces of Child Link. I just don't think we see him adventuring as a child.
I think it's a solid prediction. I'm not pushing back against it, but I do hope that prediction is wrong, because that, to me, is part of, like, what is so arresting about Zelda. I like, it's fun when kids see themselves in the hero role, right? So I kind of hope that you're wrong about it, even though I think that is a good prediction.
Is going to strike a really dark tone compared to the games. I think they're going to do that because when you look at games or when you look at the closest thing we can really compare it to is probably The Witcher on Netflix. And that is a decidedly, I mean, the Witcher games are dark, sure, but I think that's likely what Nintendo and studio executives are pointing at and being like, yeah, this can work, because it's the closest thing we have to a proof of concept for a Zelda live action feature. I think if you have that kind of lightheartedness that's really enjoyable in the games, it won't translate the same. It'll create that cognitive dissonance where it works in one medium but just doesn't in another. It falls really flat, really hard. And I think that Nintendo would be wise to kind of let this be a darker Zelda adventure, because it's something that I think runs the risk of souring people's outlook on the franchise if not handled correctly. Like, you can look at the comments on our video that we just posted, and it's 50-50 on people being excited and terrified about this. So I think that Nintendo has something to prove here. I think that the Mario movie is not a good put up for this, like saying, hey, we're going to do one with real people. I think people are understandably leery of the concept.
I don't know if I think they're going to go that dark with it. I think they're going to try to strike a balance. I don't know if Nintendo's going to be willing to go like full grimdark with it. Maybe I'm not quite honing in on how dark you actually mean, but
we have to remember that Miyamoto is the guy who didn't want Mario to hold up a, two fingers peace sign because he didn't like how it looked and it didn't represent the Mario image. So he is very like, I almost wish that Miyamoto wasn't as involved, because I do feel like he has these walls up, like it's his baby. He wants it treated a certain way. You know what I mean?
Every supporting character is going to be a Toad. Ship it.
Oh, no.
If Miyamoto's involved, everything's a Toad. That's it, except for Link. Just Link and a bunch of Toads.
That would be horrifying.
We'll see.
But I'm cautiously optimistic currently. I know that the kind of the cast behind it has an equal number of hits to misses, but I feel like Nintendo really took the lesson they learned with the original Mario movie very seriously, in that they exited the entire space for like 30 years. So I feel like there's a significant amount of pressure to make this right. And we know that previously they worked on a Zelda live action with Netflix, and it got scrapped. So something happened there that Nintendo didn't like, and it just went away. So I'm hoping that whatever this is, that they've kind of, I imagine at this point they have to have seen and approved of a lot of stuff that obviously they're not making public. So I was very worried about the Mario movie, and that those fears proved to be unfounded. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt here and hope that by the time we see a trailer for this, which again is probably years off at this point, we're probably a minimum of 2 to 3 years away from a trailer.
I looked up when we got the announcement for the Mario Bros. Movie, which was September 2021, by the time it eventually came out in 2023. And production was already like well underway before then. So they said that they've been working on this for a few years now.
Yeah.
But if we're not even ready to hear who the cast is, then I don't know. I think it's going to be at least 2025.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
All right. With that being said, let's get closing thoughts. Rebecca, do you have any other thoughts you'd like to share on the Zelda movie?
I think if you had asked me a few hours ago if I wanted there to be a Zelda live action movie, I would have said, no way, don't touch it, leave it alone, we're fine. But I don't know, now that we talked about it a little bit and thinking more deeply, and now that it is going to be a reality, I'm cautiously optimistic, like you said.
How about you, Ash?
I'm still in the middle on it. I'm still thinking of like the CG Zelda movie that maybe could have been, or the partially CG Zelda movie that could have been. I'm a little bit, I wanted to say I'm optimistic. I'm just a little bit more worried, I think, than I am optimistic, but I also trust Nintendo to be as guarded with this IP as they always have been and not do it unless they really feel like they're going to get this right. And of course, I think back to the Mario movie, and we were all like, oh, DreamWorks, oh man, I don't know. We weren't sure how it's going to turn out, and it turned out great. So I am cautiously optimistic. Exactly. I think I'm just a little bit more in the middle still, but I am looking forward to, I love Zelda to death, so I'm looking forward to seeing how this all develops.
Nice.
For sure.
Yeah, I would say both of you have wrapped up my thoughts on it personally very, very nicely. I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, and time will tell. Bookmark this video. See if we were right about our predictions in a couple of years. Until then, thank you so much, Rebecca, for joining us. Where can we find you?
Yes, I am at Forest Minish, mostly on Twitter and Twitch. I write for Twinfinite. I stream. I do a bunch of stuff. I just love Zelda.
We'll have links to all of Rebecca's stuff down in the comments below, or down in the description below, not in the comments. We don't put our own stuff there. That's where you tell us we're wrong. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe to keep up with the latest on the Zelda movie, all things gaming, everything. We do it all here at GVG. We have a Patreon if you want to check that out. We're also now doing YouTube memberships right below where you're watching this. So if you want to join us, hit those buttons. There's all kinds of different tiers you can join at. But until next time, folks, thanks again. This has been a thrilling discussion. We've got a lot more on this coming whenever Nintendo decides to tell us more about it. But until next time, folks, bye, everyone.